The Korthani had ruled for 300 years through one simple truth. Fear worked better than any weapon. They had learned this lesson by destroying entire worlds and enslaving countless species. They knew exactly how to break the spirit of any enemy. Commander Vextal studied the human prisoners with cold calculation. These soft creatures were no different from the others who had fallen before Korthani might. They would beg and cry and submit like all the rest. But first, they needed to understand their place in the universe. The commander walked among the separated groups of humans, adults in one area, teenagers in another, small children huddled together in fear. His red visor scanned their faces, reading their terror like words on a page. Perfect. Terror was the foundation of order. Bring the recording equipment, Vextal ordered his soldiers. Every occupied world will watch what happens here. Every species will remember why they serve, the Empire. Black machines rolled into the cargo bay on metal wheels. Camera lenses focused on the crowd of prisoners. Transmission arrays began broadcasting across the Korthani communication network. Millions of beings on dozens of worlds would witness what came next. Dr. Lisa Bennett pushed through the crowd toward the children's group. She was the colony's chief medical officer, a woman in her 50s who had spent her life healing people. Her hands were shaking as she approached the Korthani commander. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "These are children. They have done nothing wrong. If you need to punish someone, punish me. I am the senior medical officer. I accept responsibility for everyone on this ship." Vextal turned his masked face toward her. His voice carried no emotion at all. "Your offer is noted and rejected. Children make the best examples because they represent hope. When hope dies, resistance dies with it." Captain Morrison and Colonel O'Brien moved forward together. Both men knew they were walking toward their own death, but they could not stand by and watch. Morrison spoke first. "Commander, we surrender completely. We will work in your mines, serve in your labor camps, do whatever you demand. But please, leave the children alone. They are innocent." "Innocence is a luxury that trespassers cannot afford," Vextal replied. He gestured to his soldiers. "Restrain these two. They will watch what happens next." Energy weapons fired. Both men fell to the floor, their bodies locked in paralysis, but their minds still aware. They could see and hear everything but could not move a muscle. Other parents who tried to rush forward were stunned the same way. Little Emma Rodriguez stood in the center of the children's group, still holding the hand of the younger boy beside her. She looked up at the towering aliens with confusion. She did not understand why everyone was so afraid. In her 8 years of life, adults had always protected her from danger. "Mama?" Emma called out, looking for her mother in the crowd. "Mama, where are you?" Maria Rodriguez was unconscious on the floor where the guards had stunned her. Her husband Carlos was slowly waking up, blood still running from the wound on his head. When he saw what was happening, he tried to crawl toward his daughter despite his injuries. Vextal pointed at Emma with one armored finger. "This one will serve as your lesson in obedience." 2 Korthani soldiers moved toward the little girl. Emma finally began to understand that something terrible was about to happen. She started backing away, her small hands reaching out toward where she thought her parents might be. "I want my mama," Emma said, her voice getting higher and more frightened. "Please, I want my mama." The soldiers grabbed her arms with their metal gauntlets. Emma screamed as they lifted her off the ground. Her yellow dress fluttered in the artificial gravity of the cargo bay. Her brown pigtails bounced as she struggled against their grip. "Mama! Daddy, help me!" Emma's cries echoed through the cargo bay. Other children began crying louder. Parents fought against their paralysis, trying desperately to move, to do something, anything to save her. Dr. Bennett fell to her knees. "Please, I am begging you, she is just a baby. Take me instead. Take any of the adults, but please not her." Vextal activated the broadcasting equipment with a command from his armor. His voice now carried across 17 star systems, reaching every world under Korthani control. "Citizens of the Empire," he announced, "witness what happens to those who defy our authority. Let this serve as a reminder that the Korthani rule absolutely and that resistance brings only death. The camera focused on Emma's terrified face. Her brown eyes were wide with fear and confusion. She did not understand what the words meant, but she could feel the hatred coming from the aliens who held her. "I want to go home," Emma whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "Please let me go home." Carlos Rodriguez had managed to crawl closer, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His voice was weak but filled with desperate love. "Emma, Daddy is here. Daddy is here, baby girl." Emma heard his voice and looked toward him. "Daddy? Daddy, help me. I am scared." The Korthani soldiers carried Emma toward the open cargo bay doors. Beyond them lay the vacuum of space and certain death. The little girl began screaming louder as she understood where they were taking her. "No, no, please, I will be good. I promise I will be good." Every human in the cargo bay was screaming now. Parents, grandparents, teenagers, everyone was crying and begging for Emma's life. The sound was like nothing the Korthani had ever heard before. It was the sound of a species having its heart torn out. But Commander Vextel felt nothing. He had overseen thousands of executions across dozens of worlds. This was just another day's work, another lesson in the price of defying the Empire. Tetor. Recording equipment captured every moment. Emma's final screams as she was carried toward the airlock, the desperate cries of her parents, the moment when the cargo bay doors sealed shut, and the terrible silence that followed. What the Korthani did not understand was that they had just made the greatest mistake in their 300-year history. They had shown the galaxy something that would change everything. They had revealed their true nature to a species that would never forget and never forgive. The broadcast ended, but the recordings were already spreading beyond Korthani space. Automated relay beacons carried the signal toward the outer rim, toward human colonies, toward Earth itself. Soon, billions of humans would see what had happened to Emma Rodriguez. In the cargo bay of the New Haven, 3,000 people sat in stunned silence. Something had broken inside all of them. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by something much more dangerous. Something that would burn across the galaxy like wildfire. Maria Rodriguez had awakened just in time to see her daughter die. She had not spoken since that moment. She sat on the floor staring at nothing, her mind trying to process what had happened. When she finally spoke, her words were quiet but filled with terrible promise. "They will pay," she whispered. "They will all pay for what they did to my baby." Commander Vextal heard her words and felt nothing but satisfaction. Another broken parent, another spirit crushed beneath Korthani power. He had no idea that he had just lit a fuse that would burn down his entire civilization. The age of ruling through fear was about to end, and the Korthani Empire had written its own death sentence in the blood of an innocent child. The black ships came out of nowhere. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Haven watching his screens fill with enemy contacts. 17 massive warships surrounded his colony vessel like wolves circling prey. The ships were dark as night, covered in sharp angles and glowing red lights that looked like angry eyes. Jake's hands shook as he reached for the communication controls. 3,000 people lived on his ship. Families with children who had left Earth hoping for a better life on the outer worlds. They carried farming equipment, medical supplies, and dreams of building homes under new stars. They had no weapons, except small arms for hunting and protection. The lead enemy ship was 3 times larger than the New Haven. Its hull was black metal covered in spikes and weapon ports. Red symbols glowed along its sides like fresh blood. Jake had heard stories about ships like this, whispered in the dark corners of space stations. The Korthani Empire, the monsters who ruled 17 star systems through fear and death. "This is Captain Morrison of the colony ship New Haven," Jake spoke into his microphone. His voice sounded small and weak. "We are peaceful settlers with proper navigation permits from the Galactic Trade Council. We mean no harm to anyone." The response came immediately. A deep voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone filled the bridge. "Human vessel, you have entered Korthani space without permission. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction." Jake looked at his crew. First Officer Betty Walsh was pale as paper. Engineer Carlos Santos was already shutting down the engines as ordered. They all knew they had no choice. The Corthani ships could turn the New Haven into scrap metal in seconds. Chuck. Boarding pods attached to the hull with loud crashes that echoed through the ship. Jake heard screaming from the lower decks where families were hiding in their quarters. Children were crying. Parents were trying to comfort them, but everyone was afraid. The airlock doors exploded inward. Corthani soldiers poured through the opening like a black tide. They were tall, nearly 8 feet high, covered in dark armor that made them look like death itself. Their faces were hidden behind red glowing masks. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The soldiers moved through the ship with brutal efficiency. They knew exactly what they were doing. This was not their first time taking prisoners. They herded people out of their rooms with electric prods and harsh commands. Anyone who moved too slowly was shocked until they fell to the floor screaming. Jake watched helplessly as families were torn apart. The soldiers separated men from women, adults from children. They forced everyone into the main cargo bay, a huge space that normally held farming equipment and supplies. Now it held 3,000 terrified human beings pressed together like cattle. Lieutenant Colonel Danny O'Brien pushed through the crowd toward Jake. Danny was the colony's military advisor, a former Earth Defense Force officer who had volunteered to help protect the settlers. He was a good man, but he had no real authority here. His job was supposed to be advising on planetary defense, not fighting alien invaders. "Jake, we need to do something," Danny whispered. "They're separating the children from their parents. This is not a normal boarding procedure." Jake nodded. He had seen it too. The Corthani soldiers were pulling children away from their families and putting them in a separate group. The kids were screaming for their mothers and fathers. Parents were fighting to reach their children, only to be beaten down by electric prods. In the middle of the chaos, Jake noticed one little girl who was not crying. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez stood quietly in the children's group, holding the hand of a younger boy. She had brown hair tied in pigtails and was wearing a bright, yellow dress her mother had made for her. Emma was looking around with wide eyes, trying to understand what was happening. The girl's mother, Maria Rodriguez, was screaming and fighting against the guards who held her back. "Emma, Emma, come back to me." Her husband Carlos was unconscious, on the floor, blood running from his head where a soldier had hit him with a weapon. A new figure entered the cargo bay. This one was different from the soldiers, taller, with golden markings on his armor instead of silver. The other Corthani stepped aside as he walked through their ranks. His mask was different too, with more detailed designs that showed his high rank. "I am Commander Vextal of the Corthani 4th Fleet," the figure announced. His voice was even deeper than the others, filled with cold authority. "You humans have made a serious mistake by entering our space without permission." Danny stepped forward, his military training overriding his fear. "Commander, we have legal navigation permits from the Galactic Trade Council. Our documents are in order. We are peaceful settlers, not invaders." Vextal turned his masked face toward Danny. The red glow from his visor seemed to brighten with amusement. "Your permits mean nothing here, human. The Galactic Trade Council has no authority in Corthani space. You are trespassers, and trespassers must be punished." The commander walked slowly through the crowd of prisoners. People moved away from him like he was made of poison. His armored boots clicked against the metal floor with each step. He stopped in front of the group of children, studying them like a farmer choosing livestock. "The adults will work in our mining colonies," Vextal announced to the crowd. "The older children will serve in our labor camps. But first, you must learn the price of defying the Corthani Empire. You must understand that your weakness has consequences." Jake felt ice water fill his veins. He knew what was coming. The stories from other worlds, the whispered tales of Corthani cruelty. They always made examples. They always chose the most innocent victims to send their message. Vextal pointed at Emma Rodriguez with one armored finger. "This one will serve as your lesson." Maria Rodriguez screamed louder than anyone had ever screamed. She fought against the guards with inhuman strength, breaking free for a moment before being stunned unconscious. Other parents tried to rush forward, but electric prods and energy weapons kept them back. Little Emma looked up at the towering alien commander with confusion rather than fear. She did not understand what was happening. She thought her parents would protect her. She thought the adults would make everything okay. Two Korthani soldiers grabbed Emma's small arms and lifted her off the ground. She finally began to cry, calling for her mother and father. Her yellow dress looked bright and cheerful against the dark armor of her captors. "Let the galaxy see what happens to those who challenge us," Vextal commanded. The cargo bay doors opened to reveal the blackness of space beyond. Recording devices activated, broadcasting what would happen next across the Korthani communication network. Every occupied world would see. Every enslaved species would understand. Jake Morrison closed his eyes and prayed to whatever gods might be listening. But deep in his heart, he knew that something had just been set in motion that would change everything. The Korthani had made many enemies over the centuries, but they had never made an enemy like humanity. They were about to learn the difference. The message reached Earth 3 days after Emma Rodriguez died. The automated relay beacon had carried the Korthani broadcast across hundreds of light years, passing through communication networks that the aliens did not even know existed. By the time the signal arrived at Sol System, it had been copied and transmitted thousands of times. General Patricia Hayes was in her office at Earth Defense Command when her aide brought her the encrypted file. She was a tough woman who had spent 40 years in the military, fighting pirates and defending colonies from raiders. She had seen death before. She thought she was prepared for anything. She was wrong. The recording started with Commander Vextal's announcement about trespassers and punishment. Patricia watched with growing anger as the Korthani separated families and terrorized innocent people. But when the camera focused on Emma Rodriguez, something inside her broke. The little girl looked so small next to the armored aliens. Her yellow dress was bright and cheerful, completely out of place in that dark cargo bay. When Emma called for her mama, Patricia felt tears running down her face for the first time in 20 years. By the time the recording ended, Patricia was shaking with rage. She had watched an 8-year-old child murdered in cold blood for no reason except to send a message. The Korthani had crossed a line that should never be crossed. Patricia activated her emergency communication system. Within minutes, every senior military commander on Earth was connected to the secure network. Admiral Kevin Carter appeared on her screen first, his face pale with shock. "You saw it?" Patricia asked. "We all saw it," Kevin replied. His voice was quiet but filled with deadly purpose. "That little girl could have been any of our daughters, our granddaughters. This cannot stand." More faces appeared on the screen. General Bobby Turner from the Marine Corps, Admiral Nancy Foster from Fleet Command, Colonel Gary Miller from Special Operations. All of them had watched the recording. All of them had the same expression of cold fury. "What are our capabilities against the Korthani Empire?" Patricia asked. Admiral Carter pulled up tactical displays. "They have 17 star systems under their control, an estimated 2,000 warships of various classes. They have been the dominant military power in that region for 3 centuries. And us? We have maybe 300 ships that could be considered combat-worthy. Most of our fleet is designed for exploration and colony support, not warfare. In a straight fight, we would lose badly." General Turner leaned forward on his screen. "Then we do not fight straight. We fight dirty. We fight like humans." Patricia nodded. She was thinking the same thing. The Korthani ruled through fear and overwhelming force. They expected their enemies to meet them in open battle where superior numbers would win. But humans had never been good at following other people's rules. "I want every weapons research project declassified immediately," Patricia ordered. "Every theoretical design, every experimental technology, everything we have been keeping in the vault. Money is no object. Time is no object. I want our entire industrial capacity converted to war production." The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end, they had outlined a plan that would have seemed impossible just days before. Every Human colony would contribute ships and resources. Every research facility would focus on military technology. Every factory would build weapons instead of consumer goods. But the most important part of the plan was not military. It was psychological. Dr. Marcus Webb led the Human Research Consortium, a collection of scientists and engineers who worked on advanced projects. He had been watching the news feeds from across human space, seeing how people were reacting to Emma's death. "The response is unlike anything we have seen before," he reported to General Hayes. "Recruitment offices are being overwhelmed with volunteers. People are donating their life savings to the war effort. Entire families are enlisting together." Patricia was not surprised. Humans had always been protective of their children, but this was something more. The Korthani had not just killed one child. They had shown the galaxy that they considered human children to be disposable. They had declared war on human families everywhere. On the colony ship New Haven, now docked at a Korthani prison facility, the survivors were changing too. Captain Jake Morrison could see it in their faces. The fear was still there, but it was being joined by something harder and more focused. Colonel Danny O'Brien had started organizing the prisoners in secret. He used religious services and family meetings to pass information and give quiet orders. The Korthani guards thought they were watching broken people pray for salvation. They did not realize they were watching soldiers prepare for war. Dr. Lisa Bennett had been assigned to work in the prison medical bay. The Korthani used her skills to keep their slave laborers healthy enough to work, but she also used her position to gather intelligence about the facility and pass messages between different prisoner groups. Maria Rodriguez had not spoken much since her daughter's death. She worked in the prison laundry, washing the uniforms of the guards who had killed Emma. But Colonel O'Brien noticed that she was listening to everything, remembering every detail about the facility's layout and security procedures. "She is planning something," Danny told Captain Morrison during one of their whispered conversations. "I can see it in her eyes. She is not broken. She is waiting." The news from Earth reached them through coded messages hidden in supply shipments. Other prisoners smuggled in reports about human fleet movements and military preparations. The Korthani had no idea that their prison facility had become a spy network. "They are building new ships," Morrison whispered to his fellow prisoners during a work detail. "Designs we have never seen before. The entire human race is mobilizing for war." Word spread through the prison like wildfire. Humans who had given up hope began to believe again. They started exercising in secret, maintaining their strength for the day when rescue would come. They memorized guard schedules and facility layouts. They prepared to fight, but the most important change was happening in the galaxy beyond human space. The Korthani broadcast had been intercepted by dozens of other species who lived under the Empire's rule. They had watched Emma Rodriguez die, and they had seen something they had never expected. For the first time in 3 centuries, someone was preparing to fight back against the Korthani. The humans were not negotiating or surrendering or begging for mercy. They were building weapons and gathering allies. They were choosing war over submission. On Velton Prime, the surviving members of the Velton resistance movement met in secret caves to discuss what they had seen. The Veltons had fought the Korthani for 50 years before being crushed and enslaved. Their leader, an old warrior named Cathrax, studied the human broadcasts with growing excitement. "They are serious," he told his followers. "These humans are not making empty threats. They are actually preparing to attack the Empire." Similar meetings were happening on dozens of worlds. Species that had been conquered and enslaved were starting to hope again. If the humans could fight the Korthani, maybe they could win their freedom too. The Korthani leadership on their homeworld remained confident. Commander Vexital sent regular reports about the docile human prisoners and the success of their terror campaign. He had no idea that he had started a war that would end his civilization. Emma Rodriguez had been dead for only 2 weeks, but her death was already changing the galaxy. The little girl in the yellow dress had become a symbol of innocent life, destroyed by evil. Her image appeared on resistance broadcasts and rebel propaganda across 17 star systems. The Korthani had ruled through fear for 300 years. They had never faced an enemy like humanity, a species that turned grief into rage and rage into unstoppable determination. They were about to learn that some acts of cruelty have consequences that last forever. The fire Emma's death had lit was spreading across the galaxy, and nothing would be the same again. 6 months after Emma Rodriguez died, the first human fleet arrived at the edge of Corthani space. What emerged from hyperspace was nothing like the primitive colony ships the aliens had encountered before. These were vessels built for one purpose, only war. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching her fleet take formation around her flagship. 200 ships had made the journey from Earth, but they looked like they belonged to a completely different civilization than the New Haven. The Retribution itself was a monster of black metal and glowing blue energy. It was twice the size of the largest Corthani dreadnought, armed with weapons that human scientists had only dreamed about 6 months ago. Stealth frigates flickered in and out of visibility like ghosts. Destroyer squadrons moved in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with missile tubes and energy cannons. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Corthani border station," her communication officer reported. Susan nodded. She had been expecting this. "Put it through." The main screen filled with the image of a Corthani commander. His red visor glowed with what might have been amusement. "Unknown vessels, you are entering Corthani space without authorization. Turn back immediately or face destruction." Susan stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. She was a small woman compared to the towering Corthani, but her eyes burned with cold fire. Behind her on the bridge, the image of Emma Rodriguez was displayed on every screen. The little girl's innocent face looked out at the alien commander. "I'm Admiral Susan Clark of the Human Defense Fleet," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We are here to deliver a message to your empire." The Corthani commander's mandibles clicked with what passed for laughter. "Humans, we have already dealt with your kind. Your colony ship provided us with excellent slaves and a useful example of what happens to trespassers." Susan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, we know about the New Haven. We know about Commander Vextal. We know about what you did to Emma Rodriguez." The image changed on the screens behind her. Now it showed the recording of Emma's execution, broadcast across Corthani space months ago. The little girl's final moments played in front of the alien. "Commander, you killed our child," Susan said simply. "Now you will learn why that was a mistake." The transmission ended. Susan turned to her weapons officer. "Begin the attack." What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The human fleet moved with mechanical precision, their ships coordinating perfectly despite being spread across thousands of kilometers of space. Stealth frigates appeared inside the Corthani defensive perimeter like magic, their weapons already firing before the aliens could react. The border station was destroyed in the first 30 seconds. Its massive shields, which had protected it for over a century, collapsed under the assault of human plasma cannons that burned hotter than the core of a star. The station's crew had no time to send a distress signal before their home became a cloud of expanding debris. The Corthani patrol ships tried to respond, but they were fighting enemies they could barely see. Human ships moved faster than anything the aliens had encountered before, striking from impossible angles and disappearing before return fire could reach them. Advanced targeting systems tracked multiple targets simultaneously, while point defense arrays shot down incoming missiles with surgical precision. In less than an hour, the entire border system was under human control. Susan allowed one Corthani ship to escape, its crew carrying word of the attack back to their commanders. She wanted the Empire to know what was coming. The news reached Commander Vextal at his prison facility within hours. He studied the reports with growing concern. The humans had somehow developed military technology that seemed decades ahead of anything they had shown before. Their ships were faster, more powerful, and used tactics that made no sense according to traditional warfare. "How many ships did they lose?" Vextal asked his intelligence officer. "None, sir. The human fleet took no casualties at all. Our border defenses were completely overwhelmed." Vextal felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt. The humans had turned a crushing defeat into a crushing victory in just 6 months. That was not normal. That was not possible. On the prison world of Corthus Prime, Captain Jake, Morrison and his fellow prisoners heard about the attack through their secret communication network. The news spread through the facility like wildfire. Human forces were not just coming to rescue them. They were winning. Colonel Danny O'Brien gathered the senior prisoners for a secret meeting in the laundry facility. "This is our chance," he whispered. "The guard rotation will be reduced tomorrow when they send reinforcements to the border. We can take control of the communications array and signal the human fleet." Dr. Lisa Bennett had been preparing for this moment for months. She had mapped every corridor of the prison, identified every security checkpoint, and developed relationships with prisoners from other species who were ready to join the uprising. "The Veltans in Block 7 are with us," she reported. "So are the Thylan refugees in Block 3. If we move together, we can overwhelm the guards before they can call for help." Maria Rodriguez spoke for the first time in weeks. "When do we start?" Everyone turned to look at her. Emma's mother had been silent since her daughter's death, working quietly and keeping to herself. But now her eyes burned with the same cold fire they had seen in Admiral Clark's broadcast. "Tomorrow night," Colonel O'Brien replied. "During the shift change at 0200 hours. Maria nodded. "Good. I want to be the one who opens the cell blocks. I want to be the one who tells them their nightmare is over." The human fleet was already moving deeper into Corthani space. Admiral Clark had divided her forces into 3 battle groups, each one targeting a different prison world. They moved, fast striking before the Corthani could organize proper defenses. The first liberation came at a mining facility on Draconis 4. The human task force arrived to find the orbital defenses already in chaos. Prisoners had somehow taken control of the facility's weapon systems and were bombarding their own guards from space. Commander Tony Martinez led the assault troops that landed on the planet's surface. They found thousands of beings from dozens of species, all of them armed with captured Corthani weapons and ready to fight alongside their rescuers. "How did you organize this so quickly?" Tony asked the leader of the prison uprising, a Veltan warrior named Kithrax. "We have been planning for months," Kithrax replied. "Ever since we saw what the humans were willing to do for one dead child. We knew that if you would fight for her, you would fight for all of us." The liberation of Draconis 4 was broadcast across the galaxy on every communication channel the humans could access. The message was simple but powerful. The age of Corthani terror was ending. Those who had suffered under the Empire's rule would be free. Similar uprisings erupted on prison worlds throughout Corthani space. Species that had been conquered and enslaved for generations suddenly found the courage to fight back. They had seen that the Empire could be defeated, that their oppressors were not invincible. The Corthani leadership on their homeworld watched in growing panic as system after system fell to human forces and their alien allies. Their prison facilities were being liberated, their patrol fleets were being destroyed, and their reputation for invincibility was crumbling. Emperor Krexnal, the supreme ruler of the Corthani Empire, called an emergency session of his war council. "How is this possible?" he demanded. 6 months ago, these humans were helpless colonists. Now they are destroying our fleets and liberating our prisoners. His chief military advisor, General Thakval, studied the tactical reports with confusion. Their technology appears to have advanced by decades in just a few months. Their ships use weapon systems we have never seen before. Their tactics are completely unpredictable. "Then we must use our ultimate weapon," the Emperor declared. "Prepare the planet killers. If we cannot defeat them in battle, we will destroy every world they try to liberate." But even as the Corthani prepared their most terrible weapons, they failed to understand what they were really fighting. This was not just a war between 2 species. This was a war between 2 completely different ways of thinking about power and justice. The Corthani ruled through fear because they believed that strength came from making others weak. The humans fought with fury because they believed that strength came from protecting those who could not protect themselves. Emma Rodriguez had been dead for only 6 months. But her death had already changed the galaxy forever. The little girl, who had died in terror, had become a symbol of hope for billions of beings across dozens of worlds, and the humans who fought in her name were just getting started. 2 years after Emma Rodriguez died, the war was almost over. The Corthani Empire that had ruled 17 star systems for 3 centuries was falling apart. System after system had joined the human-led coalition. Prison worlds had been liberated. Slave colonies had been freed. The galaxy was waking up from a 300-year nightmare. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the Retribution as her fleet approached the Corthani homeworld. Around her flagship, over 1,000 ships moved in perfect formation. Human vessels fought alongside Veltan cruisers, Thylan destroyers, and warships from dozens of other species that had broken free from the Empire. The Corthani homeworld was protected by massive orbital fortresses that had never been challenged. Giant space stations bristling with weapons surrounded the planet like a metal shell. For 3 centuries, these defenses had been the symbol of Corthani power. No enemy had ever gotten close enough to threaten the Empire's heart. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the lead fortress," her communication officer reported. Susan nodded. "Put it through." The main screen filled with a familiar face. Commander Vextal, the alien who had killed Emma Rodriguez, stared back at her from his command center. His red visor glowed with the same cold arrogance he had shown 2 years ago. "So the humans have finally come," Vextal said. His voice carried no fear, only contempt. "You think your primitive ships can challenge the might of our homeworld defenses? You will die here, just like that pathetic child died in my cargo bay." Susan stepped forward so he could see her clearly. Behind her, Emma's picture was displayed on every screen, just as it had been throughout the war. The little girl's innocent face looked out at her killer with eyes that seemed to promise justice. "Commander Vextal," Susan said calmly, "you are under arrest for war crimes, including the murder of Emma Rodriguez and thousands of other innocent beings. Surrender now, and you will receive a fair trial." Vextal's mandibles clicked with cruel laughter. "Surrender? To inferior creatures like you? I would rather die fighting than live in a galaxy ruled by humans and their weak allies." "So be it," Susan replied. She turned to her weapons officer. "Begin the final assault." The battle for the Corthani homeworld was broadcast live across the galaxy. Billions of beings on hundreds of worlds watched as human ships and their allies attacked the seemingly impregnable fortresses that had protected the Empire's capital for centuries. The orbital defenses opened fire first, sending streams of energy and missiles toward the approaching fleet. For a moment it looked like the Corthani might be right about their invincibility. The space around their homeworld lit up like a deadly fireworks display. But the human ships had learned much during 2 years of war. They moved like dancers through the defensive fire, their advanced shields deflecting shots that would have destroyed earlier vessels. Stealth frigates appeared inside the fortress perimeter, their weapons targeting critical systems with surgical precision. On the surface of the Corthani homeworld, Emperor Krexnal watched the battle from his palace throne room. For the first time in his long life, he felt fear creeping into his thoughts. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They moved with purpose and coordination that seemed almost supernatural. "My lord," his chief advisor said quietly, "perhaps we should consider opening negotiations with the human fleet. We could offer them tribute, territory, anything they want." The Emperor's eyes burned with rage. "Never! The Corthani do not negotiate with inferior species. We rule or we die." In space above the planet, the tide of battle was turning. One by one, the great fortresses that had protected the homeworld for centuries were falling silent. Human weapons cut through their defenses like hot knives through paper. Ships that had taken decades to build were destroyed in minutes. Commander Vextal found himself alone on his command fortress as his crew abandoned their posts. His weapons were offline, his shields were failing, and human boarding pods were attaching to his hull. He activated his personal defense systems and prepared to make his final stand. The airlock doors exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through the opening, their weapons ready for battle. Leading them was Captain Jake Morrison, the man who had commanded the New Haven 2 years ago. He had spent the war fighting to reach this moment. "Commander Vextal," Jake said, his weapon trained on the alien's chest, "you are under arrest for the murder of Emma Rodriguez and crimes against sentient beings throughout the galaxy." Vextal drew his energy sword and charged at the humans with a roar of rage. The battle was brief but fierce. When it ended, the commander who had terrorized the galaxy for decades lay stunned on the floor of his own bridge, his weapon broken and his armor cracked. On the planet below, Emperor Krexnal made his final choice. Rather than face capture and trial, he activated the palace's self-destruction system. The explosion could be seen from orbit, marking the end of the Korthani royal line and the empire they had built through fear and cruelty. The War Crimes Tribunal was held on neutral territory, presided over by judges from every species the Korthani had oppressed. Millions of beings across the galaxy watched as Vextal and his surviving officers faced justice for their crimes. Maria Rodriguez took the witness stand on the final day of the trial. She had aged years in the 2 years since her daughter's death, but her voice was strong and clear as she spoke to the court. "My Emma was 8 years old," she said, looking directly at Vextal. "She loved to draw pictures of the stars and dream about the worlds we might visit. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up to help other children learn about the universe." Maria paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "You took all of that away from her. You took her life, her dreams, her future. But you also did something else. You showed the galaxy what evil looks like. You proved that there are beings so cruel that they will kill innocent children to make a point." She stood up straighter, her voice growing stronger. "But Emma's death was not meaningless. It brought the galaxy together. It showed us that good people will fight against evil when they see it clearly. My daughter's life and death have made the universe a better place." The judges deliberated for 3 days before announcing their verdict. Vextal was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against sentient beings. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but the empire he had served was dismantled completely. The former Korthani territories were placed under the protection of the new Galactic Defense Coalition, led jointly by humans and the species they had liberated. Former slave worlds became independent planets. Prison colonies were converted into rehabilitation centers. The age of ruling through fear was officially ended. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, established the Emma Rodriguez Memorial Academy on the former site of the Korthus Prime prison facility. Officers from across the galaxy came there to learn not just military tactics, but the principles that had driven humanity to transform grief into justice. The Academy's central building was built around a memorial garden, where Emma's statue stood surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds. Children from dozens of species came there on school trips to learn about the little girl whose death had changed everything. On the statue's base, a simple inscription reminded all who passed of the truth that had transformed the galaxy. They thought our children were expendable. They were wrong. Dr. Lisa Bennett, now director of the Academy's medical program, often brought new students to the memorial garden. She would tell them Emma's story and explain how one act of unspeakable cruelty had awakened something in humanity that the galaxy had never seen before. The Korthani ruled through fear because they believed that making others weak made them strong, she would say. But humans fight through love because we believe that protecting others makes us stronger. Years passed and the galaxy healed from the wounds of 3 centuries of oppression. New worlds joined the coalition. Trade flourished between species that had once been enemies. Children grew up free on planets where their parents had been slaves. But Emma Rodriguez was never forgotten. Her image appeared on coalition ships and government buildings. Her story was taught in schools across the galaxy. She had become a symbol of innocent life, protected by those strong enough to defend it. Maria Rodriguez lived to see her granddaughter, graduate from the Emma Rodriguez Memorial Academy. The little girl looked remarkably like her aunt, with the same brown hair and bright smile. As Maria watched her granddaughter receive her commission as a coalition officer, she whispered a prayer of thanks. "She did not die for nothing, Emma," Maria said softly. "Your death saved the galaxy. Your life will be remembered forever. The galaxy had learned two important lessons that would never be forgotten. Some lines should never be crossed, and humanity would ensure they never were again. The age of fear was over, replaced by hope protected by those who understood that the universe's greatest strength came from protecting its most vulnerable children.